In a world where most stories move quickly, where dramatic headlines compete for attention, where every celebrity headline promises shock, surprise, or sudden twists, this story does not rush. It unfolds slowly, quietly, almost like watching a long, unmoving shadow inside a room where nothing seems to change, yet everything is changing. Because behind the stillness, behind the calm faces, behind closed doors where silence lingers longer than usual, Kurt Russell's wife is preparing to say goodbye, not suddenly, not dramatically, but with a long, heavy sadness, the kind that settles into the corners of life and refuses to leave. And this is where the story begins. The sun was rising slowly in the way the sun often does without any need for hurry. Its light moved across the quiet rooms of the home that Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn had shared for decades. There was nothing particularly remarkable about this sunrise. It came as all sunrises come steadily, predictably, without sound or ceremony. But on this morning, the light felt heavier, as if it carried a weight that had not been there before. Goldie Hawn sat at the small wooden table in the kitchen, a place she had sat thousands of times. The chair creaked the same way it always creaked. The coffee cup felt the same in her hands. But today, her breathing was slower, measured, careful, almost as though she was trying to find the right rhythm to keep the morning from collapsing into something she could not control. Across the hallway, Kurt Russell was resting as he had been for hours. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, just the slow, steady stillness of a man whose life had recently been interrupted by a diagnosis that arrived quietly, the same way this morning did, without warning, without a dramatic announcement, without a single sign that life was about to change. The doctors had spoken in their calm, clinical way. They explained the condition as though reading from a textbook. They described symptoms that moved slowly. Symptoms that were subtle. Symptoms that would gradually take away things that had once seemed small, like energy, clarity, balance, and memory. They explained how the process would not be fast, how it would not be loud, how it would not be dramatic, but how it would be certain. And certainty, Goldie realized, could be the heaviest thing in the world. Goldie stirred her coffee, not because it needed stirring, but because the motion gave her something to do. The spoon moved in slow circles, making the same quiet tapping sound against the cup, over and over. The repetitive sound filled the room, becoming part of the quiet morning in the same way breathing becomes part of life, constant, unnoticed, but undeniably present. She remembered how Kurt used to walk into the kitchen with his usual energy, a kind of casual confidence that made even an ordinary morning feel slightly brighter. He would joke about needing stronger coffee. He would talk about old movie sets.
He would laugh at things that nobody else remembered. He would smile in that familiar way that made everything feel predictable and safe. Now, those morning routines had been replaced by something much slower, much softer, much more fragile. She looked toward the hallway again. The light was shifting through the window, stretching across the floor like a thin, pale blanket. Nothing moved. Not even dust danced in the air. The stillness felt almost unnatural. She took another sip of coffee, although she wasn't really tasting it. Her thoughts drifted back to the doctor's office. She remembered the moment when the words were spoken. The diagnosis hovered in the air like a cloud that refused to move. She remembered feeling a kind of numbness, not sharp or painful, just dull, heavy, slow. The doctor's voice had been steady, calm, almost rehearsed. Kurt's expression had been equally calm. Goldie had tried to match their calmness, even though she could feel something inside her sinking in slow motion. Since that day, everything in their life seemed to mirror that same slow descent. Movements became slower, conversations shorter, days quieter. nights longer. And although no one said it aloud, everyone could feel it, the gentle but unmistakable shift toward a future that neither of them wanted to face. In the living room, a clock ticked, its rhythm steady and predictable. Goldie listened to it for a long time. Tick, pause, tick, pause. Each sound felt like a reminder of how time moves, not quickly, not urgently, but steadily, without stopping, without negotiating. Time does not ask if you are ready. It simply moves. She thought of the years she had shared with Kurt. Years filled with films, memories, laughter, family gatherings, quiet nights at home, and long conversations about nothing in particular. None of those memories felt dramatic. None of them felt extraordinary. But in their simplicity, they formed a life that felt full. Now, she realized, even the simplest moments were becoming rare. Kurt shifted slightly in the other room. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but Goldie heard it immediately. She stood slowly, taking a deep breath before walking toward the bedroom. The hallway felt longer than usual, as though each step she took stretched time even further. She reached the doorway and paused, looking at him. He looked peaceful, calm, almost like he was simply resting after a long day. His breathing was slow and steady. His eyes were closed. The soft morning light rested gently on his face. Goldie walked to the edge of the bed and sat down carefully, not wanting to disturb the stillness of the room. "Kurt," she said softly. His eyes opened slowly. It took a moment for them to fully focus. Another moment for recognition. Another for understanding. Goldie waited through all of it, patient as always. "Morning," he whispered. His voice was quieter than she remembered. Not weak, but softer, as though each word required more effort than before. "Morning," she replied. They sat in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Just silence. The kind that fills a room when words feel unnecessary. She reached for his hand. It was warm, familiar, steady, the same hand she had held through so many years of their life together. He gave the smallest smile. A tired smile. A grateful smile. A smile that said more than words could. And Goldie felt something shift inside her again, that slow, heavy acknowledgement of what was coming. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon. Slowly. Inevitably. She knew the time was approaching when she would need to accept what the doctors had told them. She knew the diagnosis would eventually take pieces of him that she could not protect. She knew that every day, even the calmest days, brought them closer to a difficult goodbye. And in her own quiet way, she had already begun saying goodbye. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but slowly, the same way life was changing around them. Little by little, moment by moment, word by word, memory by memory. The way one says goodbye to someone they love more than anything. The way someone prepares for something they cannot stop. The way a heart breaks very quietly. Goldie remained seated beside Kurt, listening to the soft rise and fall of his breathing. The quietness in the room felt almost like a blanket, heavy, warm, and unmoving. It was the sort of silence that didn't feel empty, but instead felt full of things unspoken. Thoughts, fears, memories, all of them floating around the room like faint dust particles that refused to settle. Kurt turned his head slightly, looking at her with tired eyes that still held the same familiar gentleness she had always loved. His gaze lingered, slow and thoughtful, as though he was trying to memorize her face, even though he had seen it thousands of times before. "You're up early," he said quietly. Goldie nodded. "Just couldn't sleep." He nodded slowly, as if he understood because he did. They both understood. Sleep had become harder, not because of noise or discomfort, but because of the thoughts that filled the night. Thoughts that did not rush but moved slowly, methodically, repeating themselves over and over again until sleep felt impossible. Kurt shifted again. It was a small movement, but Goldie noticed every detail. How he moved more carefully. How he took a second longer to adjust the blanket. How even simple motions required concentration now. She watched him, not because she wanted to monitor him, but because she found herself noticing everything. Every breath, every blink, every tiny change. It had become a habit, one she didn't consciously think about, but one that had become part of daily life since the diagnosis. "Did you eat?" he whispered. Goldie shook her head. "Not yet. I just wanted to sit with you for a bit." He gave another small nod. No dramatic reaction. No emotional moment. Just a slow, quiet acknowledgement that seemed to match the pace of their new reality. For a while, they sat without words. The silence stretched, soft and steady, filling the space between them. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't awkward. It was simply there, the way shadows are present in a room even when no one notices them. Goldie rested her hand gently on Kurt's arm. Her touch was light, careful, steady. He didn't pull away. In fact, he leaned into it ever so slightly, as if the warmth of her hand gave him something to anchor himself to. The room remained still. Nothing moved except the slow shift of sunlight creeping across the floor. It moved in small increments, almost unnoticeable unless one stared long enough. But Goldie saw it. She saw everything these days. She watched the light touch the edge of the bed, then his pillow. Then it brushed lightly across his shoulder, warming the fabric of his shirt. Kurt closed his eyes again, not to sleep, but simply to rest. Even resting had become a slower process now. Goldie spoke quietly. "Do you want me to open the window?" He didn't answer immediately. It took him a few seconds, which had become normal. Every question now required a pause, a moment of processing, a moment of deciding whether to respond or simply let the question drift away. Finally, he whispered, "Maybe later." Goldie nodded, even though he couldn't see her. The window remained closed. The air remained still, and the morning continued its slow, unchanging rhythm. She looked around the room, noticing things she had never paid attention to before. The soft lines on the curtains, the faint dust on the bookshelf, the way two picture frames leaned ever so slightly to one side. Small details that had always existed but had never seemed important. But now everything felt meaningful. Everything felt like part of a world that was slowly shifting, slowly fading, slowly becoming something different than it once was. She looked at the pictures on the wall, images of their family, their children, their shared life. Smiling faces, vacations, old movie premieres, birthdays, moments frozen in time. In the photos, Kurt looked strong, vibrant, full of energy. The contrast between the man in the photographs and the man resting on the bed was subtle but unmistakable. Not sad, not shocking, just gently, quietly different. Goldie's eyes lingered on a picture of the two of them standing on a red carpet. She remembered that day clearly, the noise, the flashes of cameras, the excited reporters. Everything had been fast, loud, chaotic. Now, everything moved in the opposite direction. Slow, soft, silent. She wondered how a life that once felt full of motion could suddenly feel so still. Kurt opened his eyes again, turning slightly to look at her. "What time is it?" he asked. Goldie glanced at the clock on the wall, the same clock whose ticking had been echoing through the house all morning. "Just after 7, she replied. He nodded in the slow, thoughtful way he now responded to most information. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "Feels earlier." Goldie gave a soft, almost invisible smile. "It does." Time had been acting strangely for them lately. Some moments felt too long. Others felt too short. Hours felt like entire days. Days sometimes felt like moments. Time had not changed, of course, but the way they experienced it had. Kurt shifted again, lifting his hand slightly as if trying to reach hers. Goldie moved her hand without hesitation, placing it gently in his. His fingers curled slowly around her own, his grip soft but intentional. They sat like that for a long time, their hands intertwined, their breaths moving at different rhythms but somehow still in sync. Goldie's thumb moved lightly against the back of his hand, not in a dramatic gesture, but in a small, repetitive motion. Calm, steady, reassuring. Kurt didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them felt full enough. After a while, Goldie whispered, "Are you cold?" Kurt took his time before answering. "No," he said finally. "Just tired." She nodded again. Tired had become part of everyday life now. Tired was expected. Tired was normal. She brushed a small piece of lint from his blanket, a small, meaningless gesture that somehow felt important. Kurt watched her for a moment before whispering, "You don't have to fuss." Goldie gave a faint smile. "I know." Another long silence followed. "But I want to," she added quietly.